the test that this president is going through public opinion around the world, and he's standing up to it.
Not only is he surviving, he's thriving.
Right.
And
Russia has set up such a tremendous defensive system.
All right, but we won't deploy high frontier because it might inspire the Russians to be even more devious.
I want
So then what we'll do is we'll lull the Russians by doing absolutely nothing and being supine.
Sure.
But I can tell you something. The United States deterrent has prevented nuclear war since 1945. So why adopt a policy of weakness which could increase, not decrease, the risks of nuclear war?
But I think even beforehand they've gotten $1 million worth of publicity out of the.
Oh, they're quelling in on 6th Avenue.
But the whole
up there on the whatever floor it is, the 19th, 20th floor. They're quelling. That means they're gloating. They're just their buttons are popping. They can't believe it.
Tired of appeasing the Russians, worrying about, what will the Russians react, how will they react, which way will they, if we do this or do that. And also, people myself also are sick and tired of seeing these, these old nerds with their little signs calling for a one-sided nuclear freeze.
Would immediately change the balance of forces. And the Soviets, once we announce implementation of it, the Soviets might do something very rash. Now, I don't think, I think...
Well, then what we should do, if we want to accept your non-thinking, David, is we should never do anything which we think is in our own enlightened self-interest because it might provoke the Soviets. So rather than provoke them, we should call them on the hotline and say, Yuri, we know you've got a bad cold, but could you tell us what should we do so we don't make you nervous? You're making me nervous, David. Colombia and Mexico want Castro out just as much as we do. If that be the case, why is it that Mexico undercuts us every opportunity? Does anybody know any time when the regime in Mexico City has stood up and said, hear, hear, to anything that Ronald Reagan has said, or for that matter, even that Tower of Jelly predecessor? You remember him? Let's see, how did he sound? Is Jimmy, I never lied to you. Carter, I never lied to you. Remember him? Remember, I never lied to you. No, make no mistake. The Mexican government has great antipathy and great resentment for los Estados Unidos. And it's a very sad situation. I haven't spent much time talking about it, if any at all. It's a very sad situation, though, because the Mexican people are some of the nicest people in the whole wide world. And I have found the people to be just delightful. But their government is corrupt. Their government is duplicitous. And their government never forgot that we remembered the Alamo. They never forgave us for finally defeating Santa Anna. They never forgave us, and they never will. And we kiss their tortillas and hope that maybe by kissing their tortillas, they'll like us. They'll never like us. The people, yeah, there's a chance with the people. But, hey, look, they're coming across the borders in such droves, they'll all be here anyway. So, Lieutenant General Daniel O. Graham, and General Graham is project director for High Frontier.
Well, High Frontier is on its military side, is a system a non-nuclear system that will intercept Soviet missiles as they rise out of the Soviet Union and destroy them with pellets, that is, not lasers and so forth. We often get mixed up on the laser business. We do it with off-the-shelf technology that we do it in a way that we've actually known how to do for 20 years. And what we propose is this satellite system go in so that we don't so we can drive the possibility of nuclear war back to zero. It turned, I haven't got anything. If it needed to be nuclear to protect the country from nuclear weapons, I wouldn't have anything against it because it doesn't do anything unless one perceives a a lot of missiles coming at us, and it can't hurt anybody on the ground. All it can do is knock down missiles that have already been committed to kill Americans. So if it did take nuclear weapons, I'd be for it. The fact is that it does not require nuclear weapons because the pellets are moving so fast. The satellite itself is going 17,000 miles an hour to stay in orbit, and when the little rocket takes off with the pellets, it adds another couple of thousand miles an hour to the velocity, and what it does is kill things with kinetic energy, and kinetic energy is mass times velocity squared over 2, and if you're squaring 20,000 miles an hour, you need very little mass, so you really don't need a nuclear weapon to do this defensive job. Now, I suppose it's a good thing to get people thinking about the fact that we don't have any defenses, and that probably is going to help High Frontier because we've got the defense for them. On the other hand, it was, they really, there's some pretty crass exaggeration in it. For instance, poor old Jason Robards gets a fatal dose of radiation 30 miles away from the nuclear detonations, and there isn't any weapon in the world that would have done that to him. But I guess that's nitpicking a bit. I think that probably people should think about it and should pick one of the 3 options open to us. One is simply to add more nuclear weapons so that the Soviets believe that we can turn their whole country into Lawrence, Kansas, or we can hope that somehow the Soviets turn into nice guys and we can get rid of all of our nuclear weapons. Or 3, you can do what we say in High Frontier, and let's use our long suit of superior space technology to prevent this from happening. Yep. I think if they know their options, they're going to go with us.
Earlier today, he was trying to have an open dialogue on the impressions of that hype job that ABC called The Day After. His very first caller so incensed me and impressed me in a negative way that, and by the way, I just couldn't believe what she said to Barry, that I asked the engineering department if they would reproduce a tape of the conversation. I have it. I want you to listen, especially to this woman's last remark to Barry. But here is a conversation that was as it was heard.
I want to make a comment about your comment that it is, you hope that the people in the Soviet Union will be viewing that. I hope so too, but I think we should all remember that it is far more important that we view it than that they view it, because unlike the people in the Soviet Union, we have influence, or should, on our government's actions. And this government is responsible to me. The Soviet Union is not responsible to me. This government is...
Well, what are you saying?
I am saying that the people in the United States have to bring pressure to bear that our government is not so belligerent that it sets up situations in various parts of the world.
For example?
Well, for example, I will say that the government has also been prudent through the years. It is true that for 40 years we have possessed the weapons. We've only used them once. It has to be remembered that only one government ever pushed the button, however. It happened, unfortunately, to have been this one.
Ma'am, you say unfortunately. Are you old enough to remember the day that the bomb was dropped?
Yes.
If you'll recall, there was great cheering in the streets and byways of America. And we saved, according to statistics, we saved at least 100,000 American casualties.
Come on, Barry.
No, I'm saying according to statistics.
Yeah, but you and I know.
No, you and I don't know anything. I am not privy to the secrets of those places.
Privy to the fact, you certainly know that the use of that bomb was extraordinarily controversial when people sat down to think about it. After we realized that we knocked off 100,000 human beings at one crack because we wished to get to Tokyo before the Russians did.
I don't think that's, ma'am, I don't think that's exactly what Harry Truman was thinking of.
Also, for making sure that we that we don't start sending the Marines all over the place. We are doing that with alarming frequency lately because because it's not going to be the United States, and it is not going to be the Russians.
Ma'am,
going to drop a bomb.
Ma'am, we've sent the Marines lots of places when Ronald Reagan was not the president.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, John F. Kennedy took a... We have Khrushchev to thank, not John Kennedy, that we weren't blown up in 1962.
Oh, come on. Oh, come on.
All right. Unbelievable. Here you have ostensibly an American woman calling an American radio talk program, and yet that woman at no time in her brief diatribe, at no time in her short exchange with Mr. Gray, at no time did she have anything positive to say about the United States. And yet, on the other hand, everything was laudable about the Soviet Union. It doesn't take any great genius to figure out that this woman's heart is in the Soviet Union. Now, all we have to do is see to it that her body joins her heart.
I call it a media cover-up, but they didn't tell you or let the public know that the producers of that show have been long time involved in the anti-nuclear movement. I'm pretty sure if the National Rifle Association produced a movie about, some man protecting his family with a rifle,
yes,
that would be well publicized. Or if Roy Cohn or David Shine did a story on
yes. In other words, we would know where they were coming from.
Right there.
Brandon Stoddard, who is the main perpetrator of Day After, was also responsible for friendly fire. And friendly fire was done in such a way that you really have to believe that he thought the Americans were really the bad guys, not the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese. I think Brandon Stoddard has a lot to answer for, and I hope someday the American people demand a complete exposure of the gentleman. Thank you.
During that whole discussion I was listening to it, and they were all talking about warheads and this and that, and I think the only one who cut through all the heavy atmosphere of the night was Mr. Buckley at the end in his closing remark, and he was very clear, he was magnificent. He goes, the whole purpose of, that we even have nuclear weapons to begin with is to prevent the Soviets from imposing their wretched form of life upon us, and I think that kind of cut through the entire night. By Ted Koppel and the rest of them, they didn't, pay much attention.
Speaking of Ted Koppel, I couldn't understand why he was so hostile to the Secretary of State.
It was rather unusual, wasn't it, Bob?
Yes, it was. He was unnecessarily hostile. And, of course, George Shultz, being the gentleman that he is and the consummate professional that he is, did not let that affect him. Well, it was a big nothing anyway. I mean...
well, that's what he said.
The greatest hype that ABC had going for it were all these warnings of people not to watch or to watch in groups. What we were taken in.
Well, absolutely absurd. And they should know that strength is the most important thing, and that's the only way that we'll keep our freedom.
Of course, if I were interested in seeing the hammer and sickle fly over the nation's capital, then I would, of course, be in the vanguard of those who tried to foster that myth.
Yeah.
And I would if I had it. But it just shows... Oh, yes, I do have it. It just shows you the warped imaginations of the Bob Grant WMCA listening audience. I love them just the same. This is addressed to the seductive produceress of this broadcast, the voluptuary who goes by the name of Nicole Sandler. Dear Nicole, it says Sanders on here. Okay. Dear Nicole Sanders, first of all, I want to say you have a lovely name. I'm sure you are just as lovely. The reason for my writing is that Bob Grant mentions your name many times during his program. I have been listening to Bob many years. However, never has he mentioned his producer's name, as he does yours. You must know that Bob is a woman hater. That is why I am very curious regarding his apparent attachment to you. I've begun to think you and he have a thing going. If this is so, I do wish you good luck. Maybe Bob will allude to my supposition sometime during his program. As a matter of fact, Bob has just mentioned to his friend from Yonkers that when he visits Arthur Avenue, he wants you to accompany him as if to show you off. Sincerely, Harriet Fleischman, Oceanside, Long Island, New York. P.S. to Bob. I love you, Bob. I am your ardent fan and champion. Keep up your work in the same vein. I admire your truthfulness in spite of constant criticism. Oh.
They had this Dr. Caldicott on.
Oh, Helen Caldicott. You know what I want to do? I'm glad you mentioned her, Dorothy. Then I'll let you talk. I want to call Senator D'Amato.
Yes.
And find out what the heck this woman is doing in this country. She's not even a citizen. What the heck gives her the right to come to this country and stir up trouble?
Hold it, Bob. How do you like the way your mind and my mind are in complete tune? Why did I mention her? Because I react to her exactly.
I guarantee you, if I went to Australia, if I was a visitor in her country, I would keep my big mouth shut.
Well, Bob, you have to...
I don't want to... saying this to you is like putting gasoline on a fire. But you know what occurred to me?
What?
All the networks,
yes,
all the networks were leading their nightly news with the destruction in Lebanon a little over a year ago.
Yes.
Right now, they're tearing the second major city of that country apart.
Yes.
It's not at the top of the news. Isn't that interesting?
I know, but Bob, what can we do about the fact that they are playing this down and pretending it doesn't exist?
Well, you know how you could get them to put it at the top of the...
Yeah.
Tell them that the guys doing most of the damage are Israelis.
I know that.
And then it'll be at the top of the news.
Between him and Brandon Stoddard.
Well, Brandon Stoddard, I tell you, he's the guy that I would like to get. I'd like to be alone in a room with Brandon Stoddard for just 2 minutes. And from the looks of him, all I'd need would be 1 minute.
And I'll tell you something. Dr. Caldicott, she's a doctor.
No, I swear, please, Nicole, remind me. I've got to call Senator D'Amato, find out if she's a citizen. If not, whether we can get her deported. Get her out of here.
But people that are born here, like that woman, I heard that woman today on Barry Gray's show. I tell you, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Who the hell do you think she is?
You know, I found out why the conversation ended. The autographed photo of Yuri Andropov fell off the wall and hit her on the head. Thank you very much. WMCA. Hello.
Hello, Bob?
Yes.
Yes, this is vintage brands. It's good to hear you and your...
It is vintage, and I'll tell you why it's vintage. It's vintage because those skunks out there have got my blood boiling. That's why.
Right, Bob. This is Marco from Manhattan. Listen, a little background on Mr. Sagan. Some months ago, he took the asthma position concerning the guerrillas in El Salvador.
El Salvador, right.
He signed his name, so we know where he's coming from. Bob?
Went on vacation for 2 in Atlantic City. Those of you who are in a menage-a-trois situation, I don't know what to suggest. Nope.
Yes, I heard you bring up Dr. Helen Caldicott.
I didn't bring her up, but somebody else did, and that was like throwing gasoline on fire.
She was on this morning with Regis Philbin, and I could...
Oh, now that's really where she belongs.
He saw through her, but he was too gentlemanly with her. The first thing about her is her accent.
Too gentlemanly or too timorous? Or is it because he works where he works?
Yeah, but, I salute his bravery. He did look at her, with distrustingly, and he did have a certain tone of voice.
He had a certain tone of voice. In other words, we've come to the point now, a guy can't convey his true feelings unless he does it in an Orwellian fashion.
Well, you see, it's a morning show, and I guess they figure you have to keep it light,
Oh, that's true. Listen, I know. I used to do a morning television program.
And
notice, past tense.
You know what she said? The point was this, is that, by the way, she's president emeritus of the Physicians for Social Responsibility. I wonder why he didn't ask her that, why she's emeritus.
Well, let me tell you something. I interviewed her some time ago when we had that, what the heck do they call it, special edition? We had People magazine on it, and I interviewed her, and I just asked her a few hard questions. No, I didn't throw her any cream puffs, She had a fit. She thought I worked for People magazine, and she called to complain. See, the Helen Caldicotts of the world are the supreme hypocrites of the world, because They profess they're speaking out for freedom, but they don't want freedom for anybody who disagrees with them. They're the type of people who hooted and hollered and wouldn't let the Secretary of Defense speak at Harvard last week, and 2 months ago wouldn't let Jean Kirkpatrick speak on the same campus.
That the election in November of 1984 will be the most important election in the history of mankind. She was directly implying that therefore this must be used for political reasons, that therefore Reagan or whoever the Republican is, if Reagan doesn't run, must be thrown out of office for some liberal, possibly Democrat in the election of 84. She was, in other words, using it for political purposes. She then she blamed America for the space race. I mean, not the space race, the nuclear bomb race. And because of America, Russia was therefore...
No, we've got to get her out of this country. Listen, we've got to get her out. She
said children would be afraid to brush their teeth because they wouldn't have to, because they're not going to live long enough to get cavities. She's using children in her devious, demonic methods to try to disarm this nation.
Yeah. How curious that she's doing everything she can to destroy a nation that has opened its doors to her, that allows her on national television, national radio, local television. It's quoted in the press, People magazine, Ladies Home Journal. She has gained access to every avenue of our total media availability. She has access to all the eyes and ears of Americans everywhere. And yet, her actions, if followed, would end that freedom and install a regime which would be identical to what we see in Moscow. What would she gain by that? What interest does she have? What could be her motive? Is she stupid? No, I don't think she's stupid. So therefore you have to ask, just be logical. What does she want? What does she want? A slow boat to Sydney, that's what she wants. Thank you very much.
Hello, it's about time the American people were offered some information opposite the paranoid military view of peace through overwhelming power.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's about time. Isn't it wonderful that we can have such a country that can put on a show that was put on last night?
What are you shouting at?
I think it's wonderful. I'm shouting because it's so wonderful to be heard, sir.
Good. You probably had 10 orgasms watching the thing.
I'm sure
And it's the first time in 20 years you probably experienced such a feeling, right?
You're going to put me down?
Put you down. You're so hostile. So hostile.
Yes, I do agree that we do have a wonderful country. And it's
exactly. Now, we agree on that. Then why the heck do we let somebody like Helen Caldicott come into this country? And let me ask you something. Let me ask you one thing. Has she ever said anything positive about...
people...
No, see, I'm going to ask her a question, so the woman starts screeching to shut me up.
To be here.
Let me ask you.
And we don't want it to change because people who are in high pay...
Has Helen Caldicott ever said anything positive about the United States?
Has she ever said anything positive? Yes, she says she wants to save it.
Really? I never heard her say anything positive.
That I've heard.
I never heard her say anything positive about the United States. I never heard her condemn the Soviet Union.
Well, I think that that condemning we condemned China 10 years ago, and now we're best friends.
And so that's your answer.
What's my answer to what?
To what I just asked you.
What did you ask me?
I said, has she ever condemned the Soviet Union? And that's the best you can do.
Is that making you a good American to condemn the Soviet Union? They're human beings the same as us.
No one said they weren't. Hitler was a human being, too. Would you say he was the same as us?
No, but I...
Okay, good. That slams the lid on things for tonight. Boy, I enjoyed it. This last hour seems like old times. It is established that they did play a role. Then shouldn't somebody pay for that? If Assad has the blood of 239 American Marines, or one American Marine on his grubby hands, what are we going to do about it? And before you think about your answer, just try, if you can, and ask yourself, if it were 239 Israeli soldiers who were killed, and the Israelis knew that it was directed from Damascus, what would they do?
Bombing of the Marines barracks.
All right.
And I predict that nothing will be done because it seems to me that we can be attacked with impunity by virtually any country in the world. Russia shot down the KL airliner with 69 of our own people aboard. Nothing was done on that, and I predict that nothing will be done regarding retaliation. You're absolutely right that the Israelis would respond within a few minutes.
Well, you see, Israel, although it has some people who are very misguided, they don't have a formidable panoply of pinkos and anti-American citizens in its country. We have a curious menagerie of people who seem to wait for this country to do anything, for this administration to do anything, and then criticize it. I was reading some of the remarks that George McGovern made about the president's saving of our students in Grenada, and I just couldn't believe it. Not that I've ever had any regard for McGovern. I've always known that he's a little double-gated. There's a little something wrong with him. But I still was surprised when I read the harshness of his remarks criticizing this president for what he did in Grenada. Also, that he says we never should have been in Beirut in the first place, and the context of his speech would have you believe that it really was the Marines' fault that they got killed, and that they shouldn't have been there, so therefore we shouldn't get mad at anybody because they may have perpetrated the act. So with people like George McGovern running around the country, no wonder we find it very difficult to take definitive action when it should be taken and how it should be taken.
To ask you if you read or heard about the papers and documents that were found in Grenada that indicated a intimate collaboration between the island's deposed Marxists and members of the Congressional Black Caucus.
It is a shocking, it is an absolutely sickening disclosure, and it is something that only because they are what they are do they do this with impunity. If Ron Dellums had blonde hair and blue eyes, and I'm being euphemistic, he would be ridiculed, criticized, questioned. If John Conyers, Gus Savage, these members of the so-called Black Caucus, they call themselves, I don't know if they call themselves Americans, but I'll tell you this, if they are Americans, then what the heck are the rest of us? I noticed that John Conyers, who, by the way, loves this country so much, he saw fit to join the so-called Black Caucus in damning our brilliant, successful maneuver in Grenada. John Conyers, who libeled Mayor Ed Koch and slandered the New York Police Department when he was here in September, when confronted with the truth and when confronted with a person who does not fold like a cheap camera, because Eddie Koch is not John Lindsay. And John Conyers, I think, showed his true color today when he backed down in the face of the mayor's refutation of Conyers' outrageous statements about the mayor last September. But what this proves is that the John Conyers of America, when confronted with chutzpah, when confronted with real courage, back down. When are we, the majority of American citizens of goodwill, going to realize that the more you try to placate the bullies, the more you try to make nice with intransigent, insatiable despots, the worse they become. It's the lesson of Adolf Hitler all over again, perhaps on a on a smaller scale, but nevertheless, the principles, the dynamics are the same. And so to Representative Conyers and his ilk, not all mainstream American politicians are yellow. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then forget about it. If you do know what I'm talking about tell your friends.
Topic. On page 17 of the Post today, did you see the ad that the Times turned down?
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it? So that the people who publish the newspaper are sanctimonious. We know that they're arrogant. We know that they're hypocrites. But maybe they're also being good business people, because maybe to run an ad extolling the virtues of competition maybe makes sense. Can you blame them? I mean, look, I make no brief for the Times. The editorial board of the New York Times, I have only contempt for. At the opening of the Richard Veganwald trial in Freehold, New Jersey today, the prosecution charged that the defendant was hunting for someone to kill when he lured 18-year-old Anna Olszewicz from an Asbury Park boardwalk and fatally shot her 4 times. Veganwald is linked to 5 other killings. By the way, Veganwald is just one of many murderers who had already been convicted of murdering someone and then was let out. What do murderers do when they're let out? The Supreme Court issued several decisions today as the justices returned from a 2-week recess. The nation's highest court today cleared the way for executions of convicted child slayers in Arizona and Virginia. Too good to be true. I'll believe it when I hear it.
I agree with you in that respect, but I also ask the question again. By the time he is finished, and he has so many more children, because he doesn't look like or sound like he's going to abstain from anybody, take birth control pills or anything, the mass that he leaves behind is going to be the responsibility of the government to take care of them until they're 16, if they want.
Well, you're being ridiculous. The guy's 30 years old. You act like he's going to die tomorrow.
A lot of people have died right away.
Well, then everybody go out and get a vasectomy, because you might die tomorrow.
No.
All right, Maria. Thank you very much, I think.
Bye.
I tell you, one thing you don't have to worry about is an overabundance of intellect. Say, Governor Bob Graham of Florida to proceed with the death penalty, because there was a lot of pressure on the governor of the state of Florida to give that murderer, that killer, that no-good skunk Robert Sullivan, to give him a break. And I like Robert Graham's posture in this matter. Robert Graham said, I'm going to give Robert Sullivan the same consideration he gave, and then he mentioned the name of the person Robert Sullivan shot to death. And that's exactly where it's at. It's an outrage that we have thousands and thousands of people on death row. It's perhaps an even greater outrage that we have the Charlie Mansons and the Richard Specks, the monsters such as that, who were on death row, but because of some asinine Supreme Court decision back in 1972, can never again be put on death row for the crimes they were convicted of. But I think tonight, not of Governor Bob Graham, not of murderer Robert Sullivan, not of Ernest van den Haag, who is supposed to be here to debate for the death penalty. I think tonight of Rose Schmidt. And who is Rose Schmidt? Does the NAACP Legal Defense Fund rally to her cause? Does the ACLU enlist all of its endless serpentine resources in her cause? No, there is no one who cares for Rose Schmidt except, God bless his heart, the governor of the state of Florida. And a lot of other silent Americans who do make up the majority of our citizens all around this great country of ours. Well, you see, Rose Schmidt has had to carry the pain, the agonizing, searing pain of the loss of her beloved Donald, because it was her husband, Donald Schmidt, working as a motel manager. Donald Schmidt, who neighbors and friends and relatives and teachers, people who knew him, said never heard a fly. Donald Schmidt, who had a kind word for everybody. Donald Schmidt, who helped out a lot of people. Donald Schmidt, who was murdered by Robert Sullivan. And that is the point we mustn't lose sight of. And it's so easy, what with the television coverage, what with the newspaper coverage, radio coverage, it's so easy to lose sight of what is really at stake here. We focus on the murderer as though he is the victim. Let me say that again. We focus on the murderer as though he were the victim. And we forget the Donald Schmidts, and the Rose Schmidts, and all the other thousands and thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of victims of murder and their beloved ones. We forget. But we must learn to remember.
My name is Jim, and I'm a cop from New York City. I am basically, or was until very recently, anti-death penalty for a variety of reasons. But the deterrence argument that is a false argument, and I would suggest anyone that makes it get out on the street and talk to a few murderers. Murderers do not stop and think before they do something. Most of them are very stupid, except for a premeditated murderer. Most of the other murderers are, they do it for thrills, they do it for kicks, and they do it because they get caught in a situation that they didn't expect to get caught in. Another reason, so deterrence is not a good argument from my experience on the street, and I bet I've seen more murderers than the man that wrote the book has. Secondly, what if you ever execute a wrong man, which has happened?
When? When did it happen?
It happened in England about 20 years ago. I don't know the name of it.
I see. It happened in England 20 years ago.
No, what?
Therefore, we must never execute a murderer in this country who has appeal after appeal after appeal, whose process of conviction has a torturous, lengthy journey. The likes of Robert Sullivan, who 10 years after he murdered poor Donald Schmidt, finally was executed. 10 years! You know how many times this case has been reviewed?
I know it's outrageous. And
you ought to be ashamed of yourself, and you call yourself a cop?
Well, wait a minute.
Wish the heck you'd turn in your badge. I hate to think of the likes of you being on a police force.
Oh, well, you ought to come on, too. And you'd learn.
Come on tour. I just hope that one of those murderers doesn't kill you, Jim. Shame on you.
You should put him away forever.
Shame on you. A bleeding heart on a police force. I can't believe my ears.
Well, what can you do?
All right. Thank you, Jim. God bless you.
You too.
And for that cop that tells you about murderers, I'm talking from a position of having investigated 400 murders in my lifetime, in 35 years in police work, and please believe me, if someone thinks that an individual who knew he was going to be executed would not be deterred, they're absolutely foolish. And when you can see the victims and the people who are left behind, and how their businesses and how their minds are completely damaged after losing a loved one, and the chaos that it causes throughout the entire family is unbelievable. It is amazing, Bob, it really is, how people can sit behind a television or read a newspaper and say, quote unquote, that poor innocent man was executed in cold blood after he went before the Supreme Court for 5, 6, 10, 12 years,
just like Chessman did many, many years ago. I think it was 11 years in California. And everyone says that poor, innocent individual and never spends 10 minutes to ascertain what happened to the 10, 12, or 13 years previously when the individual had killed and wiped out a mother or father, brother.
Well, the testimony in the Chessman trial was one of the most one of the most hair-raising testimonies any jury or any hardened veteran of the scene had ever heard. The fact is, he finally was executed, but you're right. It was a classic case of the bleeding hearts focusing attention where attention shouldn't be focused and forgetting where it should be.
Yesterday, when I heard them saying that the prisoner has an hour left to go, I had a little, feeling of sympathy for 2 minutes. Then I said, I'm crazy. Like Barry said today, this guy was on the death row for 10 years, and the guy he killed was on the death row for 4 seconds. Why should you have any sympathy for that guy?
Something that you said earlier, Mr. Grant, about the entitlement programs, which you said was 18% of the budget.
Yes, ma'am.
Could I ask you what programs you consider part of the entitlement programs?
Well, these aren't what I consider to be the don't ask me what I consider to be entitlements. All I know is this budgetary report, which was published in the New York Times, says 18% of the budget goes now to entitlements. So it isn't my interpretation, it's actual fact. Talking about the fact that people say, oh, we've cut back on all these things. We haven't. It grows and grows.
But you're implying that this is entirely too high a figure.
You bet it is too high a figure.
What is it?
I'm not implying at all. Let me say it right out. It is too high, Sally.
Okay.
But when a person is delivering editorial comment, such as I do on this broadcast, I do it, sometimes I feel a great deal of malice. I have malice for Yasser Arafat. I despise the skunk.
You're telling the truth.
I have malice for Yuri Andropov. I wish he'd dropped dead, and everybody in the Kremlin with him.
Bob, I have been through the heat 3 times. Twice with a simple bluff. One time.
Well, then you're a cool customer, Ralph.
Well, it comes naturally, Bob.
Well, then you're a naturally cool customer.
Well, first of all, in order to be cool, you have to have a built-in hostility towards this criminal scum. Now, fortunately...
Well, sometimes the built-in hostility renders a person very emotional, and they get so emotional they're not able to think so calmly.
Well, that's a good point. But, Bob, I must say this. When walking the streets, I have a car now. I don't have to walk so often.
Even Jack Armstrong wasn't that calm, cool, and collected.
Yes, but if you know where to walk, for instance, you don't walk inside by the houses. Walk by the curb and have a hand in your pocket. And then if someone comes out, what they'll try to do if they have a knife, what they'll try to do is test you. Like they'll walk to...
Ralph, I don't like to think about all these things. It's too much to think about. I got to watch, am I close to the curb? Do I have my right hand in my pocket? Do they think it's a gun? About Ralph?
Well, all I got to say is it has paid off for me. And all you got to do is wheel to the side, pretend you...
Wheel to the side, okay.
Well, Bob, I'm saying it works.
All right, hey, look, if it works, don't fix it, you know?
Bob, now I have a real 45. I have it right here.
You got a real 45?
Mm-hmm.
You have it in your hand right now?
No, I got it in a drawer.
Got it in the drawer?
That's right, I picked it up out of state.
You know what? I was going to ask you to do something never been done before on this broadcast. I was going to ask you to put the phone down, get the 45.
Okay.
Don't shoot the phone, but shoot in the room so we can hear it. He's not going to do it. I don't believe he'd do it.
Bob, this is it. I got it right here.
No, fire it. Fire it. Let's hear you fire it.
No. Hold on. I got the clip out. Let me take the clip out.
Aim at your landlord so you don't hurt any innocent person.
I just took the clip out and I got the trigger going here. I got it. And as a matter of fact...
This guy's playing with his gun on the air. Go ahead.
Bob, as a matter of fact, my wife's going to school right now. She got a .25 caliber pistol in a pocketbook. How about that?
This guy doesn't live in a house. This guy lives in an armory.
No, Bob, we're not going to move.
The wife with the 25. Ralph's got the 45.
And the jury the lawyer told me...
Whose lawyer?
Well, just a friend.
A friend's lawyer told you, yes?
That no jury will convict an innocent person with a crime-free record who shoots down a mugger.
Did you see Charles Bronson in Death Wish?
Yeah, I saw that picture. But
I don't know, somehow or other you're beginning to remind me of him.
they'll ever do it. Of course, I believe in capital punishment, but they don't seem to use the death penalty at all. But
well, no, there's hope. There's hope. They executed somebody in Florida last week, thanks to Governor Bob Graham, and thanks to Supreme Court Justice Byron White, they executed somebody in Louisiana yesterday.
Well, it's about time. But anyway, instead of sending our Marines to these places like Lebanon...
2 down and 10,000 to go.
And our Marines to Lebanon, whether we should even be there, I'm not sure, and to South America, why don't we do like they did in that picture, The Dirty Dozen, and send some of these criminals over? And if they, they seem to be good at murdering people, let them fight these TLOs and everything.
You could give them a choice, but I wouldn't want this country to be represented by that antisocial vermin, by those mutations that inhabit the prisons of the United States. It's amazing how one way or another we let Arafat and his bunch of cutthroats off the hook. Twice within the last 18 months. First we let them get out of Beirut. Now I let them get out of Tripoli. By the way, Lisa Lee is a Grandmaster CAZ. I guess it's called CAZ. Oh, I see. 3 names. I don't know. I'm going to be very honest. I really don't know what we're going to do this following hour. I do know that a very high-powered public relations person did a real good sell job to the producer of this broadcast. And what I'm told we're supposed to be doing, and just show you, how unprofessional I am, having people on and not even knowing what they're doing. How do you like that? They call it wild style. And these are people who are supposed to rap, which is a slang word for talk, about anything. And we're going to have these people in just a minute. I have a hunch they're going to be in early because I have a hunch they're going to be out early. But I'll introduce them to you. It's a slow day, right? Well, we had 2 good hours. What the heck? What do you want? 2 out of 3 ain't bad, as they say. Senator Alphonse D'Amato, at a hearing of the Senate Subcommittee on Securities today, said controls to protect small investors, mostly elderly, are needed because fraud and abuse in so-called penny stocks are damaging the credibility of legitimate brokers. The only thing he didn't say was that there are a lot of brokers should be put up against a wall and shot. Take mine, for example. Harry Hazarai of Ganoff and Schlemiehlenthal, he's still alive.
I used to work for the Transit Authority. I was there for 2 months and I walked out. The waste and mismanagement of that agency is unbelievable.
Yeah, the waste is and mismanagement is all around, though. It's not just, it's not just on the points that Lou Albano is making. I happen to know that to call them transit workers is a joke. What they are, transit pay takers.
Well, I want...
They don't work. And we're going to have 2 judges discussing this in just a couple of minutes. These are very brave judges appearing on a Bob Grant program. I don't know why most judges are afraid of me. Why? Because they know I don't like them, that's why.
In fact...
But I just wonder why an afternoon tabloid, actually an all-day tabloid, like an all-day sucker, this is an all-day tabloid, has to headline with all the truly important news, has to headline Jodie Foster in Koch bust.
Introduced me somewhat earlier as a college professor, which I suppose I have to admit to being. But I was speaking at a high school in Massachusetts not long ago talking about problems of the schools. And someone came up to me afterwards and he said, Professor Ravitch, you seem to be saying that we should teach these kids the work ethic. And he said, we don't live in a work ethic society. We live in a leisure ethic society. These kids are accustomed to video games and television and instant gratification. And there's a lot of drugs around. And how can we tell them to work? And I said, well, it goes to the question of, are you here to tell them what's right, or are you here to tell them to go with the flow? And if we're going to be a leisure ethic society, our standard of living is going to fall. We won't be able to create jobs because we won't grow. And as the saying goes, history is not kind to stragglers. Other countries want to grow and want to get ahead, and they'll surpass us. The figures today are that about 40% of black teenagers are illiterate, so that I think that we're not educating certainly minority youngsters as we should, and I think we're also not educating non-minority youngsters as we should.
Whose fault is it?
Well, again, not to go back to the history of this troubled
If we are prisoners of history, then so be it.
Right, we're prisoners of history. We're talking now about a school system that is supposed to be everything to everybody, that's supposed to be a social service center, to feed kids, to give them medical treatment, to be a social work center, in effect, where learning was really not terribly important over a long period of time. A school system, or many school systems, that have been a kind of a trampling ground for every sort of fad imaginable, and we've lived through many of them. Open education, deschooling, free schooling, this, that, and the other. I really feel tremendous sympathy and empathy for the teachers who've lasted it out all these years, because if all they wanted to do was to teach kids how to read or to teach them history, and by the way, we now have a New York State Education Department. Part of that bureaucracy doesn't even believe in teaching history. Yeah. We have school systems all over the country that don't even teach kids using good books. It's suddenly a big discovery. I saw a study the other day cited in one of my professional newspapers where they said a study had found that in some school system in Ohio, they taught kids how to read by using good books, children's books. And they said, lo and behold, the children would rather read good books than read their so-called basal readers, those boring basal readers. And I thought, what kind of a profession is this where it's a discovery that children would rather read good books? But that's what we have now is schools where history is unimportant, reading good books is unimportant, they teach abstract skills, and kids find it boring. We have been through a long period of a great deal of experimentation and faddishness, and today, 1983, for the first time since really the late 50s, we're talking about learning again, and that I think is very exciting. Whether it'll lead anywhere is another question.
Say that the age of experimentation is over when the Board of Education has just announced that they're going to experiment with the sexual lives of teenagers by teaching them that all kinds of sex are equally relevant in the absence of any moral standards at all, teaching them like a supermarket what kind of sex are available, and telling them that it's okay to do anything they want as long as they clean up afterwards and don't have any messy kids or don't get any venereal diseases, where they're experimenting now by teaching kids that all their parents' values don't count for anything. Isn't that the most incredible experiment for teachers who have failed at everything else and now trying to do something they're totally unsuited to doing?
Well, I suppose I should say I'm glad you asked that question. I wrote an article on this subject just a year ago in the New Leader magazine called The New Sex Education. And essentially the answer to your question is that there are two kinds of sex education. The old-fashioned kind is looked down upon and called the plumbing. And I think no one would have any complaint, or at least very few people would complain about the plumbing, because it consists of teaching children how babies are made and how to avoid getting pregnant and how you get venereal disease and how to avoid it, etc. The new sex education is very objectionable, and I haven't seen the curriculum that they're putting in at the Board of Ed, but if it's the new sex education, I think that we would all find it offensive. I've read half a dozen sex education textbooks recommended by Caucus, which is the major sex education group, and they're very objectionable. They show children how to masturbate. They show you how to perform different sexual acts. And when I think about whether a compulsory school system should have, say, state-imposed knowledge of this kind, whether the state teaches its children to do these different sexual acts, it strikes me as extremely bizarre, and I can understand why parents would object to it. And I think that the citizenry is entitled to know what the children are being taught, and I think it should be the more traditional plumbing course, which every child should know, because it would teach children how to avoid getting pregnant. And it should have as the moral of the story, don't do it, you're not old enough and you're not mature enough. And it shouldn't say whatever you do is okay as long as you don't physically injure someone else.
The Peter principle is if you're a failure at what you're supposed to be doing, then what you do is you quickly find something that you're good at, even if it has nothing to do with what you're supposed to be doing. And that's the school system today. The failures that...
Don't blame it on the teachers, because the teachers didn't devise the curriculum. I suggest you take a look at the textbooks they're going to use. And if it's the straightforward teaching children what it's all about and how to avoid getting pregnant, that's swell. And if they say to kids, don't do it, that's well. But if it's the new sex education where everybody is supposed to try everything at least once and feel no guilt or embarrassment, that really is encouraging sexual promiscuity. And I think the best way to deal with that is to see that every parent finds out what they're doing and then go to the hearings.
You talk about phonetics, and that became a political buzzword because the modernists believed in the look-say. When I was out on the coast, anybody who talked about phonetics, they didn't call it phonetics, they called it phonics. And they were usually labeled right-wing extremists, Neanderthals and whatnot.
Well,
what do you think about this man?
Okay, if it's any help, the people who are, say, the most knowledgeable people in reading today, they don't use the word phonics or phonetics, they say decoding, but they mean phonics, because the word phonics and phonetics has somehow gotten tarred with the idea that that's an extremist position. It's not an extremist position. The reason that so many school districts use these basal readers, which are incredibly boring, is because they have to have a controlled vocabulary, because the kids are supposed to memorize every word. They don't know how to read a word they've never seen before. And if you learn phonically or phonetically, or you learn to decode, you can read words you've never seen before. Let me say, because I want to tie together what you said to what the previous caller said, I think that all children can learn, and I think that black and white parents and Hispanic parents all want the same things for their children, or certainly, again, the preponderant, overwhelming majority want their children to learn. And when they're in elementary school, they should learn to read. They should read good books. They shouldn't read these very boring basal readers. They should encounter history, and they should have good teachers. And I think that's true no matter what the color of the children. And I think that if that's basics, then we should have the basics for all children.
Indeed, it is a pleasure to be in the presence of some of my colleagues. These are gentlemen that I don't ordinarily get a chance to spend too much time talking to. Ralph Howard, for example, John Scheuer, and, of course, Barry Farber, who... Ralph Howard?
I think of Communications when I think of 1984 by George Orwell, the televisions that see both ways, and I think we are a lot closer to that, Communications, and the computers that can keep track of every little thing we do if someone wants to keep track of all of that. And also the availability to tap in to my computer data file. So I think we are closer. Not there, but we're a lot closer. Is 2 and 2 4, or is 2 and 2 22? Could be either. If by 1984 we mean, do more people on the planet Earth live under Orwellian repression, the answer is yes, because dictatorship has spread since George Orwell wrote that book. But we all know well, and I expect Messrs. Scheuer and Howard to admit, that the big 1984 fans, the ones who are forever picking up the pickaxe of 1984 and trying to smite government, they don't care, or at least not in the same breath. They are not referring to the Ethiopians who've gone under Marxist dictatorship since then. They're not referring to the spread of communist totalitarianism and the lack of alleviation of fascist totalitarianism in places like Paraguay and Haiti. They don't mean foreigners. What they mean by 1984 is, look out, folks, it's happening here. And I agree with you, Bob, it most manifestly has not happened here. Very few shopping days left in 1984. And I do not feel obliged to eat grimy food from a tray while Big Brother tells me on television that war is peace and hate is love and slavery is liberation. When a driver in Kansas is stopped for speeding, I have nothing against him being delayed 45 extra seconds so the highway patrolman can go back to his radio, push a little button, and have a computerized sweep to see if it's that car that he stole from me 3 days ago in New York City, or if he's wanted for something else. I have nothing against the good guys, the law, my team, the taxpayers' team, harnessing the miracle of 20th century communications to try to get one up on the bad guys.
No, I don't, quote, unquote, convincing large segments of the population.
Shall we take it at its flood? Well, let's take it at its flood. Let's take about the yammering of complaint that we choose to call one of our missiles a peacekeeper. If you really love peace, then you should fall to your hands and knees and burn dried sassafras root in front of your nearest nuclear installation. There was a magic gong that went off in the 1960s. Nobody heard it. It was a silent gong. But at a certain instant in the 1960s, there had elapsed more time between the end of World War II and that gong than had elapsed between World War I and
the beginning of World War II. In other words, thanks to the nuclear umbrella and the nuclear capability in the hands of free peoples, this has kept the peace. And I am not at all offended. I think it is a just bit of nomenclature that a new missile be called a peacekeeper, because whether certain people like it or not, and the way Bob Grant and I live, we know certain people don't like it. Whether certain people don't like it or not, a strong nuclear capability is precisely what has kept the peace since 1945.
With the day after, I mean, depending on your political viewpoint, you saw the ending of the film meaning your point of view or supporting your point of view.
All right, I'm glad you mentioned the day after, because that, in my opinion, was the low light. Notice I don't say highlight, the low light of the 1983 television year. It's nobody's fault in the White House right now, but the fact of the matter is 18% now of our budget now goes to entitlement programs, or as they put it, money transfer programs. Under Jimmy Carter, it was 17%. That's because the Congress enacted legislation which apparently is sacrosanct.
May I? We don't like to talk about things we can't control. We go to church and synagogue for that, not talk shows. We don't like to talk about, for instance, the power of the Soviet Union, not so much anymore because they're in deep economic trouble. But once upon a time, the Soviet Union was feared to be in financial position to affect the American stock market, to buy capitalism's destruction by stock market and corporate manipulations here. Why does it never reach polite conversation that there are certain powerful nations around the world who know the difference between Ronald Reagan and Walter Mondale, who would prefer Walter Mondale in power, and who have ways and means to stage things, to pull things off just at the right time, so as to stampede the electorate away from a President Reagan not knowing what to do about a bombing or a sinking or a shoot, or made to appear impotent by some superpower. We somehow think we somehow have the naive impression that if we were to go to the ruler of the Soviet Union and say, you know something, we have elections, he'd say, yeah, every 4 years. Really? And Ronald Reagan's a conservative. Don't tell me. And there are other people friendlier to you, and not communists, not pro-communist, but pro-détente and anti-big militaries, and who will go on bended knee looking for a nuclear accommodation. These are the people who could better serve the interests of the Soviet Union. So what can the Soviet Union do? They can write out a check for $100 to the campaign committee of the candidate they would prefer. They can send communist agents to quit selling the Daily World and start ringing doorbells for a candidate they like. Or they can take the resources of the Soviet Union and either directly or through surrogates in Cuba, Syria, and a lot of elsewhere, pull something at the right time. And as one who wants Reagan to win, I fear that forces will pull something to put the president in the same fix that Mr. Carter was in with the Iranian hostages, and that Mr. Reagan...
He was a hostage.
Precisely, and that Mr. Reagan was in between the bombing of the Marine barracks and the invasion of Grenada.
I think it's been the increase in tension between the East and the West, between Russia and the United States. I really do. And also a consciousness raising around the world. And I know this doesn't appeal to you too much, Bob, but it's true. A consciousness raising that irrespective of political beliefs or any other kind of beliefs, we are increasingly in danger of the world accidentally blowing up. And something's got to be done to control that accidental potential.
John,
wait, let me finish.
I mean, the next thing you know, you're going to say, Bob, I love apple pie, and I think motherhood is great. Of course, we're all against that, John.
Yeah, but we can't just sit there and do something about it and not do something about it.
But I mean, I get this litany out of people all the time.
Litany, Schmitney.
And let me tell you what's underneath what you're saying.
Then I'll tell you what's on top of it.
No, this is a very sinister smokescreen that you're throwing out.
I know that's
because what you really are pointing at is the administration in Washington, because you know full well the Kremlin has never altered its goals and never will.
Disappear? The one incident that disappeared?
Seems to disappear.
Well, I know you're talking about 007.
Yes.
That's what happened. When Barry was filling in for me, that's when the 007 happened.
The shooting down of the Korean plane, we should point out, yeah.
When I came back to the broadcast, a caller asked me immediately, and I said, I'm glad Barry Farber was here because Barry was justifiably upset over it and understandably concerned and very articulate in his indignation. I said, but ladies and gentlemen, let's not get all excited because in a couple of weeks everybody's going to forget about it. It shows this bland course that I woke up one day and said, Eureka, I'm going to be another nerd. But being craven, being a wage slave, I act like a nerd. Anyway, having said that, in response to Bert's introduction, now I have to tell you that we're going to talk to Ted Webb, who's the sports director at WFLA Radio in Tampa, Florida. Now, get all of this. Preparations are being made for the 1984 Super Bowl. Isn't that exciting? We're going to talk about that. Now, I'll bet you when you woke up this morning, you said to yourself, gee, I wonder how things are going for preparations for the 1984 Super Bowl. I wonder how things are going. And then, of course, someone said, well, where is the 1984 Super Bowl? And you said, gee, I don't know. Well, it's in Tampa. And I suppose if anybody's a refugee from Tampa, they would be turned down, right? There's the formerly famous Bob Grant and Dave Bischoff. Fishoff, excuse me, David. David Fishoff was reminding me of the good old days when I used to tell people to get off the phone because he tells me that his father said, David, give Bob my regards. Tell him I said get off the phone. We're going to go to Dennis Lynch of Pawtucket, Rhode Island. You may recall we spoke with Dennis Lynch last year, Christmas Eve, on our Newsmaker lines. He was involved in a fight over the city-erected nativity scene, which has become the focus of a pending decision by the United States Supreme Court. And that has been asked the Supreme Court has been asked to decide whether the city's sponsorship of this depiction of Jesus represents an endorsement of Christianity.
In our attempt to retain what we think is the right of the people to continue its traditions. We're basically fighting for the right of your community to continue and have these traditions or not have them. The ACLU wants an 11th commandment, it seems to me, thou shalt not have a nativity scene. Continues, for instance, to play Christmas music throughout the downtown area, not just at this display. And I'd like to remind people, as an indication of where the ACLU is headed, that when I was first sued, I was sued on the nativity scene and the playing of Christmas music. For whatever reason, they have chosen so far in court only to discuss the nativity scene, but that certainly tells me that they're looking for a lot more.
Now, it really, in other words, if we want to celebrate it as a secular, pagan celebration, fine. But it must not be the centerpiece of Christianity.
Yeah, and of course the tie-in point to that is we had always thought that the Constitution deigned under the First Amendment to put government in a neutral position, not to foster religion, certainly. However, this kind of a suit really creates a non-religion.
That's it, exactly. And that's what the ACLU is after.
Yeah.
The total eradication from religion. You know that.
It's intellectual dishonesty and hypocrisy for them to pretend otherwise.
Thank you very much. And I hope the ACLU won't mind this. Merry Christmas, Dennis Lynch.
And the same to you.
This is Charlie from Yonkers.
Ladies, I want to tell you about this guy on the line right here. This guy is a world record holder, champion La Dombola player. He's a La Dombola player in the 1902 Olympics. Goombata from Yonkers. Okay, listen, Goombata. Buona Natale.
Buona Natale.
That was Goombata from Yonkers. Now, it made my day. It's complete.
Speaking of Jesse Jackson, if I may. First of all, before I come to the specific instance that you commented on November 28th, 83, in the Wall Street Journal, on the editorial page, they had an editorial about Jesse Jackson, and they commented on the fact that the organization that he heads, which is called PUSH, has been under federal audit for quite a while. There are several $1 million that cannot be explained.
They also mentioned the fact that he had a very close tie with Libya, where money was exchanging hands.
Oh, I think a variety of reasons. I think there's a whole host of reasons. I know one national magazine referred to sloppy bookkeeping. That's pretty good. I would like everybody who's ever facing an indictment for embezzlement or anything like that to know that if anybody gets suspicious of you, you could just say you're guilty of sloppy bookkeeping. I mean, it's something that boggles the mind. But
if Jesse Jackson is on good terms with Syria and Libya and Iran, then he cannot be a friend, so far as I'm concerned, of the American people. Because those countries are countries that we have no relations with.
Well,
and about Cranston saying that Reagan was trigger happy.
Well, that's that. Hey, you know, did you ever play the game, the wind-up doll?
But you know,
if Alan Cranston were a wind-up doll and you wound him up, he'd come out saying, President's trigger happy. He's been saying that for 45 years.
The point from Jesse Jackson. First of all, doesn't this present government support the apartheid government in South Africa?
What has that got to do with... wait, Kenneth, what does that have to do with what we're talking about?
Well, I think the whole Syria situation has been blown out of proportion.
Kenneth, answer the question, please. What does that have to do with Syria?
It has to do with that, the whole situation.
You don't know what you're talking about, the whole situation. Hello? I see on the front page of Time magazine, standing back to back, the two individuals Time calls Men of the Year. Our own President Ronald Reagan and Yuri Andropov, that slimy skunk who, at the moment anyway, is the number one crook in the Kremlin. He's the chairman. He's the head of the KGB for 15 years. And he's a killer. He's a murderer. But he's head of our chief adversary, and he must be dealt with. He or whoever will take his place. Issues. Get a load of this. City high school cheerleaders. This is from Perth, Amboy. City high school cheerleaders will meet with a representative from the U.S. Office of Civil Rights to discuss their participation at girls' basketball games. Superintendent of schools, his name, by the way, happens to be Frank Sinatra, no relation, said as a result of a complaint filed by the National Organization for Women of New Jersey, the cheerleaders have been ordered to cheer at girls' and boys' basketball games. They're ordering the girls to cheer at the girls' basketball games the same way they do with the boys. But the cheerleaders, who are girls themselves, say they don't want to go to the girls' basketball games because nobody shows up and there's just no interest in it. Can you believe that? Yeah, true. This is absolutely sickening. None of the schools said as a result of complaints filed by the National Organization for Women of New Jersey, these cheerleaders have been ordered to cheer, not only to show up and cheer at girls' and boys' basketball games, but, get a load of this, cheering with the same amount of fervor at the girls' basketball games as they do the boys' games. Can you believe that? They're going to have somebody checking fervor. The district was cited for not having equal participation in boys and girls sports. The plan is to have the same quality of cheerleading for both groups. We have not had cheering at the girls' activities, but only the boys. Perth Amboy was one of several Middlesex and Union County public school districts cited for having unequal sports activities for girls and boys. The school systems have been charged with violating regulations which prohibit sex discrimination in school athletic programs. Now, the superintendent said the cheerleaders, most of whom are girls, told their principal they did not want to cheer at the girls' athletic events. The girls, as a squad, do not want to cheer at the girls' games. They only want to cheer at the boys' games. They feel strongly They do not want to participate because there are not too many spectators. The superintendent said he had been asked to intercede in the matter by Roland Jenkins, the cheerleading advisor, and athletic director Roy Jenoski. As a result, the superintendent said he had set up a 3 p.m. meeting between some of the 30 cheerleaders and a representative from Region 2, U.S. Office of Civil Rights. Oh, everybody shake. The Office of Civil Rights. Blah, 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 blah. The United States answer to the Gestapo. We are mandated to have the program, said the superintendent. If we have the activity, then we have to do it. The cheerleaders feel it's just absolutely unfair to impose this on them, and we can't force them to do it. But you see, that's what has been. That's why I say the Civil Rights Act of 1964 turned out to be a big fraud. Someday I'm going to bring the whole Michigas into the studio and read some sections to you. I'd like to read section 703 to you, which says in part, nothing in this act shall be construed to suggest in any way, shape, or form that preferential treatment should be given to any group. Right. The U.S. Office of Civil Rights is the most un-American office in America today. It is the most uncivil rights thing we've got going for us. And if anybody doubts that, all they have to do is ask any high school principal, any grade school principal. All they have to do is ask any school superintendent. It goes on and on.
That the public school is public, and that girls in school have exactly the same rights as boys. There is no reason the athletic program in any public school, New Jersey or anywhere else, is not a minor league system for the Mets or the Dallas Cowboys. There is no reason why girls should not have equal athletic opportunities. There is no reason why minorities should not have equal educational opportunities. As it wasn't for the Civil Rights Commission, they wouldn't get these things. And there's no reason why a man with 3 daughters should see his money spent to make some guy get to be a basketball player for Philadelphia 76ers or something like that. That money has to be spent equally, and it's up to the Civil Rights Commission.
Money's got nothing to do with this particular story. Absolutely nothing. Talking about the fact that nobody is too interested in the girls' basketball games. It's a proven fact, pal. And the cheerleaders just didn't want to volunteer to go out to cheerlead at the girls' basketball games.
But that's not what they're there for. They are supposed to the teachers say, we don't want to teach girls.
Got nothing to do with that, but I can understand you having a problem, sir, with your obvious handicap. Yep.
I see that you caught the smell of red herring in the air from the previous caller.
Absolutely red herring. Well, either the guy is very clever at trying to plant a red herring, or he's as dumb as he sounds. Well, there are forces in this country that are so craven, so flushed with power, so power-mad, if you will, so drunk with power, that they want to go on to gobble up more and more of our institutions and destroy more and more logic in the process. And who can blame them? Human nature being what it is, it's the same type of attitude that a bully has until a bully is checked. The more people he beats up, the more people he wants to be beat up. So these phonies who are involved in the civil rights program, nobody stands up to them. They win victory after victory after victory because nobody stands up to them. But then when you stand up to them and challenge them with logic, then they don't know what to do. You want to hear about somebody who's living in the past, someone whose mind is set in a time frame of 1971? Some boo-boo or dumbbell or whatever you want to call her called. And not being an engaging individual, she called and instead of asking to talk to me, just talked about me. Told the producer, now get a load of this original quote. He is the Archie Bunker of WMCA, meaning me. Well, in 1971, that may have been timely and to the point. But on what basis does the lady say this? On what basis? You see what we're up against? You try to question the insanity that is going on here, that we have allowed ourselves to be inflicted with, and immediately you call names. Have this person coming in from the OCR having this meeting with the superintendent of schools and ordering the cheerleaders to perform with equal fervor at girls' basketball games.
Well, I think it's absurd.
And according to all the reports, the Middlesex County basketball is no different than anywhere else. It's just a handful of people, maybe a couple of mothers, fathers of some of the girls playing, and that's it. Nobody else is there. Call you bigot.
This NOW organization, that's a lesbian front, isn't it?
I think it probably is not set up as a front on an official basis, but I think that most of the power comes from women of that.
I think that's in the original charter.
Well, no, I don't think it's in a charter. No, it's a bunch of. For the most part, I think. Well, take a look. Have you taken a good look at the current leader? What's her name? Judy Goldsmith.
Yes.
Do you remember her predecessor, Eleanor Smeal? Take a look at them. And tell me if you'd like to hold hands in the movies with either one of them. Thank you very much. On WMCA, holding hands in the picture show. Oh, well, all the lights are low. Hey, yes.
Listen, I want to give you some foundation for the lady's accusation in accusing you of being an archibald of WMCA. I agree with her, and I'm going to give you some of the foundations. You know, I've noticed through my listening to you on the radio that you seem to be impartial to just about every race except the Jews and the Italians. When the Jewish leaders get on your radio and attack a black for trying to run to a higher position in the United States, you seem to be so involved and so delighted with the things they say, specifically Jesse Jackson. I heard the speech what the Jews were trying to do in trying to block his running for the presidency.
First of all, they're not trying to block his running for the presidency. That's number one. Number two, you say they, and there's only one person. His name was Mayor Kahana. And I've got news for you. I didn't enjoy what Mayor Kahana had to say. I agreed with what Mayor Kahana had to say. Thank you, and you're not worth another 10 seconds. I hope that's true, because the Ayatollah Khomeini is one of the most anti-Israeli people on the face of the globe, and so far he's still going strong, that skunk.
Well, I hope, one way or another, that he'll find his way back down into whichever sewer it was that he climbed out of, along with our friend Muammar Gaddafi, wherever he's doing.
Yeah, you know, I want to congratulate this administration on another point, the withdrawal from UNESCO. Even sacrosanct organs, sanctimonious editorial conclaves like the New York Times laud the president for our withdrawal from UNESCO. And you know, it was in December of 1970 on this very radio station that I denounced UNESCO and was called all kinds of names. Pardon me while for a moment I feel like saying I told you so. In the report that I gave while doing the news, I talked about the Beach Boy, Dennis Wilson. It's a tragedy, 39 years old, there he is, quite dead. But why does the report not say that he had been drinking and partying, quote unquote, all day? If he had not been drinking and partying all day, would he have acted like such a goof, diving in over and over and over again into Playa del Rey's waters? I don't say that to be mean. I say it only to point out again to so many of you how dangerous it is to fool around with mind-altering chemicals. If you... He's in the saddle. That's what you got to do. Be in the saddle at midnight, would you, Jack?
You got it. I'll try and do that.
Okay.
That's what I dream about.
Yeah, you're going to dream about... Get a Goombata. They're falling out of the trees. Come on.
Well, maybe you can help me out.
All right, Jack, I'll give you some of my spares.
That's what I need.
Okay. That brought Jack around. Listen, County, hello. Hello?
Hello.
Yes.
It's the Goombata from Yonkers.
Ladies and gentlemen, excuse me, I'm going to stand up because Goombata is calling.
Yep.
Yes, Goombata.
Bob, I get tired of you talking about Westchester County that they're not calling you. Come on, I'm calling you.
Well, I tell you, Goombata, you can't carry the whole county on your back.
Oh, try to anyway.
No, I tell you, there are a bunch of squoosh-the-mods out there, Goombata.
I know, I agree with you there.
I love what Eddie Koch said in making a New Year's resolution. Do we have that recording, or did the program director erase that one too? Every time I get a hold of a tape that I like, they erase it. Anyway, I like when he said the judges won't run this city. Did you know that the mayor made that as a New Year's resolution? God bless you, Eddie Koch. God bless you. He vowed not to let judges run the city. He says he will never again voluntarily settle class action suits like those brought on behalf of the homeless, handicapped children, and prison inmates. He said he has ordered the city's Corporation Council to vigorously fight similar suits in the future and to appeal all the way if necessary. We'll no longer agree to a consent decree. And you know what he's talking about? He's talking about very small groups of militant, dictatorial, nihilistic individuals who have intimidated bureaucracies, who have intimidated politicians, and yes, who have even intimidated the average citizen. And I love when he said that judges aren't going to run this city. Well, I hope you're right, Mr. Mayor. What are you going to do about Morris Lasker? I know, they took the tape and they let's get those tapes away from Grant. He might have fun.
Really, a great New Year to you, and I'll be listening. And I wish you have a bit more open phones. I know you'd like to.
Oh, I'd like to, but I don't have the total control over the program. Gotcha. WMCA. Well, Goombata has already called, so I don't expect any more Westchester County calls, so I won't bother giving Westchester County number.
This fellow Jackson, his problem is not that he's black. He's got a black heart. And when he gets into Syria, I hope he stays there and Goodman comes home. Because the true American, he happened accidentally to get caught flying up there. But this guy is just no good.
Well, and unfortunately, none of the candidates running against him in the Democratic primary have the couillons to stand up and say, hey, to disagree with him. They don't dare say a word. To Senator Ernest Hollings, Democrat of South Carolina, and I publicly apologize, Senator Hollings, for not mentioning the fact that apparently you alone of the other candidates stood up and said, and I'm going to quote Senator Hollings, if you don't mind, dear. He said, tell Jesse he's not president yet. He ought to stay home.
Because I feel that you do more on your program to promote racial turmoil than any other commentator on the air, Bob, and I will...
Phew, am I relieved at that. I thought you were going to say something that people could take seriously.
Look, Bob.
I'm glad you said something that's so ill-founded, so ridiculous, that nobody from any side of the aisle could take it seriously. I'm relieved.
Now, I don't like Jesse Jackson. I don't like him. But nevertheless, your anti-black campaign...
Hey, look, wait a minute, dear. Wait a minute. This is not an anti-black campaign. I think Jesse Jackson is off base in what he's doing, and I think everybody knows it. I'm sorry that he happens to be black. Too bad he's not white, so that I could criticize him without you getting paranoid. And that slams the lid on things for today and for this year. We'll look for you on January 2nd, 1984. Until then, you're... All right, January 3rd. Your influence counts. Use it.
The graph that appeared in the 1984 budget. Let's take a look at what the government is doing with our money. Okay? You'll notice that national defense only accounts for 29% of the government's expenditures. Right? Direct benefit payments to individuals accounts for 42%. Direct benefit payments to individuals. That is where the government taxes A, takes the money, and gives it to citizen B.
And yet, if you hear some of the people who want President Reagan's job, they would have you believe that it's the other way around.
No, but it's not. But it gets worse. Now, look. Grants to states and localities, 11%. Why should the federal government tax the states and cities, bring the money to Washington, and then send it back?
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why they do that. Because your buddies, those 535 loafers in the United States Congress, can have pork barrel politics only if they get a hold of the money. In other words, in order for the government to give somebody something for nothing, they've got to take from somebody else.
Right.
State. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah.
Is this me?
Well, that's what the entitlement program is all about.
No, but the Constitution doesn't authorize that kind of expenditure.
Yeah, but Tip O'Neill and that bunch love to get reelected, and they know how to do it. Launch a 2-year experiment in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Let's hear it for Haverhill. Ready? All right. Bus riders charge their fares, and they receive a monthly bill. Can you imagine doing it in this city? First of all, 4 out of 5 don't even know their address, so they wouldn't be able to tell you where to send the bill. Secondly, 2 out of 5 don't even speak English, so who the heck could communicate? And third, 5 out of 5 wouldn't pay it anyway.